Hi, I'm standing close to Elsfield Way, also known as the northern bit of the Ring Road, and I'm going to do something that two commenters have asked me to do, namely visit the Victoria Arms, the pub on the River Cherwell in Old Marston. And I'm going to show three ways of getting there. The first one is the least pleasant because of the Ring Road, but I'm going to show it for completeness. It's a useful bit of geography. And I'm standing here out of the way so that I don't get drowned by road noise. This is the roundabout bit of the Banbury Road. It's crossing Sunderland Avenue there, and I'm going to turn right and walk as quickly as I can to a footpath not far from the River Cherwell, and then try to get to the Victoria Arms down there. And when I've done that, I'll try to other routes. And I say try to get there. The ground can be quite wet at this time of year, but we've had so much dry weather recently that I hope I'll be okay. And it looks as though I'm also going to have the chance to show yet more new building in Oxford. So now I'm coming on to Elsfield Way, which is named after a village called Elsfield, not far from Old Marston. Some bikers enjoying themselves. But why do they always have to wear black leather? Surely pink would be more fun. Now I'm coming up to Cutteslowe Park and the bridge connecting the two sides of Cutteslowe across the Ring Road. Well, I've just stepped into an inset, into a road going down there to put on a mask. Not because of COVID, which is my usual reason, but because of the stupid amount of traffic belching out fumes. I can't help thinking that if you had this amount of pollution in a factory, it would be closed down on health grounds. That's an underpass to the other side of the road there. That's the Cutters Bridge, and there's a park on its north there. That goes back to the estates and to Islip Road and such like, and you can walk all the way to Summertown. this is a pleasant little track south, which is an alternative way of getting to the estates. You can just see a house over there. And if you look at the other side of the road, you'll see a gap in the hedge. And the footpath used to run all the way across. And technically it still does, but no sane person would cross it now because it's just too unsafe. It was a nice path, and it's such a shame that nobody has taken it upon themselves to look after these paths where they cross big roads, to put in bridges or underpasses. There's another path that I'm going to mention that gives another nice walk off to the north. If you continue, you can go through Beckley and Elsfield, the villages, and walk along the ridge of a hill and come down into Barton, countryside all the way. But in order to get to the northern point, in order to get to the point where it crosses this road, you can't cross the road anymore because it's unsafe, and the only way to get to it is to walk along the verge there, and the verge trees are so overgrown that you risk constantly getting knocked into the road by tree branches, and it's not pleasant anyway. So that's a footpath that has effectively been put out of use. What I'm looking for is a footpath on this side which goes south, so I'm okay. That will get me to the Victoria Arms. And at least the traffic is a bit more spread out now. If the west of Oxford is dominated by the Thames, by bits of the Thames, the east is dominated by bits of the Cherwell. And this old style bridge, I bet it's crossing one such bit. I'm gripping the gimbal, the phone stabiliser, very, very tightly because these big lorries passing buffet you with huge gusts of wind and could be strong enough to knock the thing out of my grasp if I'm not careful. The footpath that I was talking about, you see the ornate gate and pillars, goes somewhere round the side of their driveway, I think. It's a long time since I've done it now because of the problems getting to it, so I can't remember. Maybe it actually runs up the driveway, but in any case there's no safe way to get at it anymore, which is a shame because it was a lovely walk. Well, this is what I'm looking for. It's the path to the Victoria Arms, and once upon a time it would also have gone across the road somewhere and ended up by that driveway, but I can't see any sign of where it used to be. Still, this is pretty delightful now that we've left the traffic noise behind. It's the sort of place that you'd have loved to come and play as a child. And this is nice too. I don't like the texture of the grass quite as much as I did the first field. That looks a bit gooey. Oh, that's odd. Sometimes I go running holding little dumbbells to keep my arms in trim, and I guess somebody has done the same, got tired and just left it here. Now, I sincerely hope these are cows and not bulls. Does anybody know how to tell the difference? The blossom is drifting. So that's back the way I came. The man who was at the side of the river in his boat is now paddling along. And here is the Vicky Arms, the Victoria Arms. And I'll say a bit more about it later, but let's just look at the landscape. The Victoria Arms was purchased in think 1958 or 1959, by the Oxford Preservation Trust to keep this part of the Cherwell Valley free from development. And looking at it, I think we can thank them very much for doing so. There is the Cherwell. Hi. Now I'm going to do path 2 to the Victoria Arms, and this time I'm standing in Old Marston village, Elsfield Road just there, Mill Lane there, and this is the road from where I am. It's the road out of Marston to the Marston Ferry Road and St Nicholas School. So I'm going to walk along Mill Lane, and a driveway was built near the end of it to carry goods to the Victoria Arms, and as a side effect to enable more visitors to go there by car. There are some nice old buildings here. I'll look at the historic buildings in Marston another time when I'm more in the village. But the house round here is famous for having hosted Oliver Cromwell. And I bet that's what the blue plaque says. That's right. In this place, the Royalist surrender of Oxford, that was King Charles, was negotiated with the parliamentarians. May, June 1646. The Cromwell Association. And Cromwell's house. There are a lot of old footpaths leading through Marston, Old Marston, and some nice places to walk. The chap there, for example, in that meadow full of yellow flowers, it goes as far back as the trees, and that's a very nice walk. That's a sweet little path that leads onto Marston Ferry Road. and that, I'm pretty sure, leads parallel to the road down to the Victoria Arms, so you can walk there as well as going down, turning left. So this is the roadway, the driveway to the Vicky Arms. And some things that I've read actually call this Mill Lane. I don't know whether it is officially or not, because that would mean that you'd need another name for that stretch of street. And I have to say, with the birds tweeting overhead and the sun and all that, this is pretty much the dictionary definition of idyllic. They've even thrown in an old-fashioned lamppost. It makes me think that rather than ordering steak and ale pie or veggie sausages, I ought to be going for a helping of ambrosia. Nowadays that's a rice pudding, but originally it was the food of the gods. And actually, this is a completely unconnected thought, but we might not be that far off making ambrosia. There's been a lot of news in the popular science press recently about the invention of a new colour. Now that may sound ridiculous, because how can you invent a new colour? We've covered all the spectrum already. But it turns out that if you stimulate the brain in a certain way, you can give it colour sensations that can't be produced by any actual light. The nearest one can describe it apparently as a sort of intense turquoise that grabs the viewer's attention and leaves the brain very little room for anything else. Well, if we can do that with colour, we ought to be able to do that with taste. And I, for one, after tasting Hovis, can't wait. See yesterday's video. So this, to recap, is the driveway down to the Victoria Arms. be warned, it is quite a long driveway. Isn't that beautiful? Victoria Arms is currently tied to Butcombe Brewery. You can see a rather faded insignia there. And here I am back in the Cherwell Valley at the Victoria Arms. Now this is path number 3 to the Victoria Arms, and it's the easiest that I've done so far. I'm now on the other side, the south side of the Marston Ferry Road, and I came out of that little tunnel, and this is the Marston Ferry Road bridge, and I'm going to walk back to the Victoria Arms and show you this path. It's an earth track, which is why I've not responded. Somebody wanted me to walk to the Victoria Arms. In fact, 2 people have asked me to walk to the Victoria Arms, but because that's an earth track, it was very likely to be boggy until the past few weeks, which is why I've not been along it before this year. Now it's fine. So this is the Marston Ferry Road. That is Summertown in that direction. That's Cherwell Drive, which I will visit another time because I've been asked to video Cherwell Drive too. And that is a path back to the university parks, and it can get a bit boggy, but it should be fine now, so I'm going to do that one sometime too. Right, let's see whether I can avoid getting mashed by the traffic. Fun fact, if you walk along the Marston Ferry Road, it's safer to do so on that side and then cross. You'll see a footpath notice, and if you try it, it doesn't lead anywhere. Or to be more exact, it leads to the other side of the river from where the Victoria Arms is. And once upon a time, there was a ferry there. In fact, I believe records say that there's been a ferry in operation as early as 1263. Marston Ferry Road was built as a link between North Oxford and Cherwell Drive, but pretty late by such standards. I think it was opened in 1971. The landlord of the pub at the time had an obligation to operate a ferry across the Cherwell, which he did, and the track up from Marston Ferry Road leads diagonally across a field to the ferry point where the ferry used to be. I think there may still be some posts there. Landlord was relieved of the obligation in 1975 because with the arrival of this bridge and the road, nobody wanted to use the ferry anymore. It was what is known as a line ferry or a cable ferry, where I suppose a boat is sort of hooked through a cable that crosses the river. I'm not sure how it was propelled. Maybe like a punt with a punt pole. So now I'm walking along the earth track to the Victoria Arms, and this is path number 3. And you can see how close the Cherwell is. There are a few little side tracks here, and in fact there's even a side track into the meadow full of yellow flowers that I pointed out. Beware of tree roots. That, I'm pretty sure, is the meadow full of yellow flowers that I was talking about, and I can see somebody walking through it. Yep, there. And here I am looking at the Cherwell and the Victoria Arms for the third time, and the Cherwell continues in that direction. Well, now I'm going to show you some sort of add-on paths. I'm still in Mill Lane, actually, so that answers the question I posed earlier. The driveway to the Vicky Arms isn't called Mill Lane, or shouldn't be. And I'm now at the northern end of Old Marston, where it hits the main road, and you can probably hear the main road. This is new since I was last here, I think, and I have to say, I don't know what it is about it. Maybe the window, it's not just the windows, but it's horrible. Instinctive reaction, it's horrible. There's something about the proportions that just doesn't work. And the paintwork. Paintwork's not lasting very well either. It's called Bradlands. I'm calling it after somebody named Brad. It doesn't seem to be a wonderful idea. Anyway, my point here is just to show you that there are one or two other useful entrances, exits to Old Marston to know. There are one or two in the south end of the village that I won't show you probably today, including one that leads through Horseman Avenue. I think that's off Marsh Lane. So that's a little footpath to the main road, and so is this. Useful things to know if you're coming into Marston, Old Marston from the north. and that is the direction to Summertown. That is the direction to Barton. Now I'm going to try and make this path number 4, or at least path number 3.5, because it occurred to me that there's a turning that might give a quicker route from the end of the first field to the Victoria Arms. So I'm going to try that. The first field will be much as before. And this is where I changed direction. Last time I went through there. This time I'm going to go over the stile and see what happens there. It's pretty well signposted by footpath standards. And it may be that this bypasses some of the wiggling around that I had to do following the Cherwell the first time. That almost looks deliberate. Another tree tunnel, like the, well, actually not quite as compact as the Thrupp one. Nice though. I had a COVID vaccination last week, a private one, because I wanted to remain safe against the latest variant, and now I've been stung by a nettle, and I have to say the sting on my leg hurts a lot more than the vaccination did. Now that must be part of the Cherwell. Not particularly broad, but enough water to do you some damage if you fell off a punt. Got my hat caught in a tree. And there's another path there that merges into this one. Good, I'm just about narrow enough to fit. I don't understand why we don't farm stinging nettles. As I've demonstrated, they're perfectly edible. And they're certainly hardy growers. This would have been boggy up to a few weeks ago. There is a bridge. You can never have too many bridges in Oxford. And here is the Vicky Arms again for the fourth time. So that was a variant on my first path. It started at the same point and finished at the same point, but was different in between. And I think, apart from the stinging nettles, I slightly prefer it for looks. So, a bit of history before I finish. The pub's website is by the brewery that it's tied to, Butcombe, and that says that it dates back to the 17th century and was originally the ferryman's cottage. As I said when I was on Marston Ferry Road, the first record of a ferry seems to be sometime in the latter 1200s. At least according to Old Marston Parish Council. Wikipedia, drawing on, I think, an encyclopedia of Oxford, says that the original building was different and that what's here now was rebuilt in 1840. Then it was closed in 1958 when apparently it was ruinous and shaky. And it was bought by the Oxford Preservation Trust, as I mentioned before, to protect this part of the Cherwell Valley from development, and they've done a very good job. As anyone who's walked over the paths that I've taken will agree. It was taken over after the Oxford Preservation Trust bought it. It was taken over by Fred and Ruby Elkins, who, as publicans, seem to be pretty well known, who added extensions to the original building. And then, I'm not sure what happened in the meantime, but there's a note saying that it was reopened in 1986. It's had various names. Apparently the 1841 census, a tithe map anyway, 1843, calls it Aylesworth. And then in the 1851 census it was Ferry House. And then in the 1861 census it was Marston Ferry. And maybe it changed its name to the Victoria Arms in 1887 for the Golden Jubilee. And its history has been intertwined with that of the ferry. Marston Ferry Road, as I also said, was built in 1971, and before that there was this line ferry, as I mentioned. The landlord of the pub had an obligation to maintain it, and was finally relieved of that obligation in 1975 when the Marston Ferry Road made it no longer necessary. And that leaves one final question that I've wondered about. If this was originally built as the ferryman's cottage, that's all well and good. Ferrymen need somewhere to live. But if it was originally built as an inn, why would there be an inn out here? Would it be purely for the local residents of Old Marston, or would it be more an inn in the sense of a staging post, somewhere for stagecoach travellers to rest and get refreshment and to have their horses refreshed? I've not been able to find anything out about that, but stagecoach travel was growing in the 17th century, so I wonder whether that was it. And perhaps it was a staging post on longish journeys that had to avoid Oxford, to avoid the trauma of getting a stagecoach down St Giles or something equally inconvenient. So that's all my paths completed, and this is my reward, a pint of Butcombe Gold 4.4. And I have to say that's pretty refreshing. Nice clean taste, slightly hoppy, maybe a sort of marmalade flavour on the front sides of the tongue. So that was 4 paths to the Vicky Arms, and I hope many people try them